So here you go. Here's the episode. The magazine. Um, you see Shannon Doherty here in the corner, some girl who says she's pregnant with Jack Nicholson's baby, and John Goodman is supposed to be cheating on his wife with this Playboy model here. And Janet Jackson's pillow talk with her ex-hubby and brother Michael. But the main story here was Nirvana, Kurt Cobain. You can see Courtney Love with Francis and Kurt there on the cover. So we open it up, and here the first story to the left is Tonya Harding is seeking a career in country music, and then after that we see the main story. I'll go back and read from the beginning, but the main story is about Kurt Cobain's death. Kelsey Grammer blows $2,000 in a wild strip club spree. And here we go on Janet Jackson, world exclusive. Her husband, James DeBarge, talking about how her steamy love-making sessions with husband James DeBarge, made love for the first time when she was 15. Her heartbreak over getting pregnant and then having an abortion. Janet's lonely, tear-filled nights, wondering whether her drug-addicted husband was dead or alive, and how brother Michael would cuddle with Janet and her husband. Janet Jackson's wedding with James DeBarge and whoever the witness was. And here's a story on Princess Diana. A shopper told Princess Diana that her credit card was no good. And then here we go with a story about Michael Bolton flying to Japan to make up with his girlfriend, and an ad with a movie nobody probably cares about anymore, a movie called The Favor, starring Brad Pitt, Bill Pullman, and who cares who else. And here's some chick saying she got pregnant with Jack Nicholson's baby. And a Cinderella Magic Castle. You can have it for just 5 monthly installments of $39. You can have that. Eric Clapton, it looks like, is in love with an Italian beauty. By the way, I'm not trying to diminish from the Kurt Cobain story, by the way, but again, I just think it's interesting to see what else was in the paper at the time. It's just interesting to go back in the past and see all this stuff. Alec Baldwin was jogging. Luke Perry got married. This is one of the Dukes of Hazzard. Dan Aykroyd out walking with his baby girl. And Julia Roberts was at a fashion show. Michael Jackson has a new cause, ferrets. He's joined a group that is trying to legalize ownership in California. With Ashley Judd, Dixie Carter, Julio Iglesias' daughter, and a snow princess you can own for just 3 installments of $18.33 each. Some girl who's rich and lonely. Some guy named Ken Wall. I don't know who Ken Wall is. Who cares? I don't know who Joe Diffie is either. Here's people writing in about celebrities. Drew Barrymore. Oprah shouldn't open her mouth about overeating. Elvis made Priscilla Presley. And says it's no surprise that Clint's Unforgiven by Sandra. I guess that's his ex-wife. And Sylvester Stallone's love child. Here's something about the 19-year-old, or no, how old is he? No, he was only 16 years old. The star of Terminator 2. And police question him about a 29-year-old girlfriend. Jim Baker is ready to make a comeback. Opera's Queen of Mean, Kathleen Battle, once called her agent across the country to complain about the air conditioning in the limo she was riding in, demanded a pianist play a song for her while she sang along in her head, then ripped him for playing too fast, stomped off during a rehearsal because she claimed the singers in the chorus were staring at her mouth, complained about the color of the carpet in her limo, and the fact that someone had the nerve to put peas in her pasta. My goodness. Lonnie, how she's helping son get over her breakup with Burt Reynolds. Wayne Newton got angry at his wedding. Jazz queen Ella Fitzgerald is courageously fighting diabetes. A new heart-to-heart TV show. Oh, and here's Shannon Doherty at celebrating her 23rd birthday at a bar in Hollywood called the Tough Club, and she got upset at somebody there. Tori Spelling had a mystery date. She got upset and started screaming at somebody and said she wanted to kill them, and people had to hold her back. You can see her trying to fight while people held her back. She's very angry. There's predictions that some psychic made about celebrities. Whitney Houston's going to have another baby with Bobby Brown. Roseanne and Tom Arnold will try to have a baby. Oh goodness, Janet and Michael. But anyway, they predicted all kinds of things about Mel Gibson, Lady Diana, yada yada. Tom Cruise. Well, Tom Cruise will focus on fatherhood. Cindy Crawford, Jerry Seinfeld, the Pope, Oprah, Saddam Hussein, Sylvester Stallone has a new girlfriend. Jim Garner's secret battles with depression. Look, there's Kate Pearson from the B-52s. Whitney Houston looking frumpy. Joan Jett. And here's the big story. Kurt Cobain. You can see a picture of the cops putting his body in the back of a truck. There's pictures of Courtney with Francis Bean at a lake. John Goodman cheating on his wife, evidently. They're not very nice to John Goodman. They say he's roly-poly. Kim Basinger took her dad, who is a war hero, to the D-Day beaches. And here's the end of the Kurt Cobain story with another picture of Courtney and her friend putting records at a shrine she made for Kurt. Crossword puzzle. Joyce Jilson sees your future and she likes what she sees. And then it ends with a cigarette ad. So this is the story, and I will read it to you. It is from Roger Hitz in Seattle. Star report on tragic 27-year-old rocker's race to the grave. Death wish. Kurt Cobain's wife, his band, and his pals tried for 35 days to save the rock star from himself. Rock superstar Kurt Cobain's tragic suicide came despite a dramatic 35-day effort by friends and relatives to save him. A Star investigation has pieced together the sad, frantic final days of Cobain, 27, the leader of grunge rock idols Nirvana, whose album Nevermind sold more than 10 million copies and knocked Michael Jackson off the top of the charts. The desperate attempt to save him included a tough love campaign by his wife, singer Courtney Love, to convince him to undergo drug rehab, special handlers assigned by his record company to babysit him, face-to-face confrontations with members of Nirvana who tried to break their leader of his addiction and obsession with death. But in the end, it wasn't enough. On April 8th, just 5 weeks after he nearly died after a suicide attempt in Italy, Cobain ended it all by blowing his head off with a shotgun at his mansion in Seattle. By the way, I'm going to stop and let you know, I know that this is a gossip magazine and that the details in this might not be accurate. They probably aren't, so I understand that. But regardless of that, even if they're not accurate, it's still interesting to go back and look and see what was written about what had happened, even if this may not be accurate. So I'm going to stop there and just let you know that I'm aware that this is a gossip magazine and it's probably not accurate, but again, it's interesting to see what was being written regardless of whether it was accurate or not. So on April 8th, just 5 weeks after he nearly died after a suicide attempt in Italy, Cobain ended it all by blowing his head off with a shotgun at his mansion in Seattle. You can't keep someone alive who simply has no interest in it, no matter who they are or how hard you try, says one insider. His suicide shocked millions of fans who had made him the hottest new rock idol in the country and who compared his songwriting talents to such greats as Bob Dylan and John Lennon, and a devastated widow Courtney, who was left alone to care for their 19-month-old daughter Frances Bean. I'm tough and I can take anything, but I can't take this, she says. I listened to too many people. I'm only going to listen to my gut for the rest of my life. It's all my fault. The desperate attempt by Courtney and Cobain's pals to save him began after he wound up in a coma in a hospital on March 4th in Rome, where it has now been revealed that he tried to kill himself with a deadly cocktail of drugs and booze. At the time, associates described the incident as an accident, but sources close to the reluctant rock idol say Cobain washed down 50 sleeping pills with champagne. You don't take 50 pills by accident, says an insider. Sources say that Cobain, who hovered near death for 24 hours after recovering, even left behind a suicide note to his wife. That near tragedy spurred friends, fellow band members, and music industry associates to launch the desperate bid to save Cobain from himself. But Cobain, racked by lifelong depression, marital problems, his addiction to heroin, and friction with bandmates Dave Grohl and Chris Novoselic, resisted all their efforts. Within days of his returning to Seattle from Rome's American hospital, he was reportedly using heroin again. Fragile and withdrawn, he shrank deeper into his own private hell. He locked himself inside a room at his $1 million mansion on March 18th and told Love he was going to kill himself. Love, 28, became so worried that she called police. Cops arrived and convinced the singer to unlock the bedroom door. They then confiscated 4 weapons, including a semi-automatic rifle, 25 boxes of ammunition, and a bottle of prescription pills. There were no arrests. Later that same weekend, Love, Novoselic, and others close to him confronted him about his heroin abuse, but Cobain refused to admit he had a problem. It was a classic case of denial, said one pal. Classic and terribly sad. This led to a falling out with his Nirvana bandmates, and sources close to the band even claimed the group had split. A week later, on March 25th, Love left Seattle for Los Angeles with daughter Frances to begin promoting her new album with her band Hole. She begged Cobain to come with her and admit himself into a drug rehab clinic. He refused at first, and for 3 nerve-wracking days, Love kept in touch with him by telephone, praying he would be all right. She warned him on March 28th that child welfare authorities might try to take Frances away from them if they learned how bad his addiction was. He was terrified of losing the baby. Authorities forced the couple to surrender custody of newborn Frances to a relative for 4 weeks in 1992, while they investigated claims that Love, an ex-stripper, was shooting up heroin during her pregnancy. Cobain was a doting dad, and little Frances was the apple of his eye. The only thing that gave him happiness was Courtney and Frances. He probably would have died earlier if not for them, said a pal. Cobain finally agreed to seek treatment and flew to L.A., where he enrolled in a program at the Daniel Freeman Memorial Hospital in Marina del Rey. He lasted 4 days before hopping a jet back to Seattle. His mother, Wendy O'Connell, filed a missing persons report with police on Monday, April 4th. Officers noted that he had bought a gun and may be suicidal. Cobain, who once admitted that he thought about killing himself every day, couldn't be found, although cops made periodic checks at his home. Love was frantic with worry. I didn't know where he was, she said. He never disappeared like that. He always called me. Panic-stricken, she hired a team of private investigators to find him, but their search came up empty. Starr has now learned that Cobain spent at least 1 night in L.A. with friends before going back to Seattle. He was hurting and depressed, said a pal, and when he was in that state, the draw towards heroin was really strong. Police and pals believe Cobain spent at least 1 night taking heroin at a connection's home after he returned to Seattle. He was also spotted by locals in a couple of parks, sitting pensively by himself just before he died. He looked despondent, said one. He looked especially unusual because he was wearing a heavy winter's coat on what was an unseasonably warm day. The following night, Wednesday, April 6th, Cobain is believed to have spent the night holed up at a secluded 11-acre estate he bought in 1992, but rarely used. Neighbors noticed fresh tire tracks leading to the estate on the outskirts of Seattle. But he was not alone. Love says she found a sleeping bag that didn't belong to them at the estate and a full ashtray. She claims some of the butts were not the brand Cobain smoked. He returned to his home in Seattle the next day, and 24 hours later his blood-soaked body was found sprawled on the floor by electrician Gary Smith, who had come to install a security system. "I saw this body lying there on the floor," said Smith. "At first I thought it was a mannequin. Then I noticed it had blood in the right ear. Then I saw a shotgun pointing up at his chin." Smith also noticed a suicide note which had been stuck into a potted plant with the pen Cobain used to write it. Love refused to release the full contents of the one-page note, but the parts she did disclose revealed the pain and anguish Cobain was feeling. "I felt guilty for so many years," he wrote. "I haven't felt the excitement of listening to and creating music for quite a few years now. The fact is, I can't fool you, any of you. It simply isn't fair to you or to me." He then wrote that he wanted to thank everyone from the pit of my burning, nauseous stomach. He also mentioned his toddler daughter. "I have a daughter who reminds me too much of myself." Cobain continued, "The worst crime I can think of would be to put people off by faking it and pretending as if I was having 100% fun." He closed by telling Courtney and Francis, "I love you, I love you." A shaken Love rushed back to Seattle, where she delivered a taped message to fans gathered downtown to mourn the death of their hero. She said in her heart-wrenching eulogy that she regretted her tough love approach to get Cobain off drugs. "We should have let him have his numbness instead of trying to strip him to the bone." A few weeks earlier, after the near-fatal coma in Rome, Love had vowed to make her husband clean up his act, bringing together record company executives, doctors, and even his two bandmates to try to help him. The second Cobain awoke from that coma, several Geffen record execs were assigned to babysit him, said an insider. Unfortunately, nothing worked, but Love refused to give up on him. "I'll follow him through hell," she swore. "If he thinks he can get away from me like that, he can forget it. I was hysterical. It was just horrible after Rome. I just couldn't take it." Nirvana ruled the rock charts for a few short years. Cobain was the hero of millions of alienated youths who saw their own pain and anguish reflected in his lyrics. But even fame, money, and love could not help him escape the tragedies and disappointments of his own shattered youth. His parents divorced when he was 10, and he spent several years being bounced around from one relative to another. He even wound up homeless at one stage and lived under a bridge. Cobain later admitted he had tried to hold his breath so my head would explode and make his parents sorry for the turmoil they had put him through. He didn't speak to his father for 8 years. "The divorce just destroyed his life," Mom Wendy said last year. "He changed completely. I think he was ashamed and he became very inward. He just held everything in. I think he's still suffering." The anger and despair of that time later resurfaced in his music. "I felt his voice, that sadness," said Courtney. "You know, the idea that every abused child in America bought Nirvana's album. It's so right. I felt a comfort and soul in his voice. Yet I never heard, read, or seen anything about Kurt even treating anyone badly. Family, friends, fans, or coworkers. All his pain and rage he turned on himself. But through his music and words, he gave a voice to the kids of the world who are abused, alone, or neglected. Doesn't that count for something?" Darcy Sanders, music director for a Seattle radio station, believes that was part of Cobain's problems. She said, "Suddenly Kurt became the spokesman for the generation, and he was totally unprepared." Cobain, who admitted a fetish for dressing in women's clothing and once declared he could probably be called bisexual, worried that he and Nirvana had sold out once they had achieved success. He was also concerned that their music was attracting the wrong kind of fans, the schoolyard jocks and moron dudes who used to taunt and beat him for being different. I look out at some of the fans who are cheering me, and I remember they used to be the ones who beat me up, he once remarked. 3 days after his death, Courtney held a very private farewell to her husband, which Starr witnessed exclusively. She walked out into her front yard and called out, "Kids, kids, this is for you," speaking symbolically to the fans who weren't really there. She lit a blood-red candle on the grass, then placed next to it a copy of Nirvana's heart-shaped box record and 2 well-worn guitar picks that Cobain and she had used. Love then slipped into a waiting limousine, but not before taking one last lingering look at the makeshift shrine. So there you go. That is the Star magazine from April 26th of 1994. I hope you found it interesting, and it's fun to go back and look at magazines from past to see, what was written about people and what was going on, and even looking at the ads. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Bye.